These interviews in no way reflect the views of E-LAI-sa Productions. This project is in no way endorsed by E-LAI-sa Productions. As students in a continuous state of learning and frequency accretion, we each hold our own unique perspective of the teachings and how they relate to our individual experiences. It is important for viewers to remember that we are in fact self-sovereign beings with free will expression, and we each carry our own perceptual filters with potential for distortion. These interviews are intended to inspire, and in no way should reflect upon E-LAI-sa, E-LAI-sa Productions, or any of her work, as there is no affiliation. More information on the Alhambra Magistracy Council of Cosminius, the Melchizedek Cloister Emerald Order, Tantriora, Tantriasia, and the Keylontic Science can be found in the provided links below. Alright, in this interview it's going to be a little different. I have my mom here with me, and we're going to discuss some of the aspects of the psyche that goes into cult religions and things like that, and myself being raised in a very cult-like church, and then my mom also. You started this church, you said, when you were like 13?
Yes. My mother came into it at 13, when I was 13.
And the church before, it was like a church before the big church that you got into, that you were a part of before.
It was considered a predecessor of the true, church. It was considered a historic predecessor of what was the true church.
And what was the true church name? You want to say the name of it?
Oh, you want the name?
Yeah, I think we can do that. It should be all right.
Okay, well, it was the Worldwide Church of God.
And the format of what Armstrong was using, it was like the first radio broadcast.
Armstrongism. Right? Initially, it was called the Radio Church of God.
He was one of the pioneers to do the radio church stuff.
Yeah, it was called the Radio Church of God, and then it became the Worldwide Church of God as it got bigger. But it was really a huge organization at one point. And then after its founder died in, I think it was in the 90s, in the earlier 90s. Well, maybe even before that. I don't have the exact date.
I think it was like 88 or something.
Maybe it was in the 80s.
Yeah.
But after he died, and then the work, as it was called, was passed on to his appointee and was run much the same. But after Herbert Armstrong died, things began to loosen up, and of course there was kind of the fight for the crown. And
yeah, I remember all the ministers were up for vote.
Yeah, there was a fight for the crown, and Herbert's son, Garner Ted, had been an eloquent speaker on the radio as well, but his personal life became questionable, and he was no longer really considered as an heir to the throne, and he went off and started his own organization, as did many of the lead ministers.
Many of them, yeah. And they were successful. Many other ones that were well,
to a degree they were. Yeah. None, of course, like Worldwide was.
Yeah. The one that Dad went into, they're still expanding right now. The one that's in Oklahoma, Philadelphia Church.
They have gotten really, really extreme. And when I say extreme, one of the things that a lot of these cults have in common is, of course, excluding anything and anyone that is outside the group.
Yeah.
And so.
Well, I remember growing up, whenever I would try to study about UFOs and stuff that I'm naturally curious about, even like the Tibetan religions and different things, I was cut off at the head. It was satanic. It was evil.
Yeah.
That you can talk. I remember even going into the doctrines and studying it to see what we were allowed to
study outside of it. It was just extremely strict.
Well, you weren't allowed to study outside of it because, I went on to attend and graduate from the college, and even the classes that I took as a student, we had a class, now that I look back, laughingly called comparative religion, where we didn't really compare religions. It was more a class in why they were wrong and we were right.
Yeah, exactly. That was the presentation from anyone else outside worldwide.
And of course, to a great degree, it was fear religion. Yeah. If you didn't go along with this, you were going to be destroyed in the 7 last plagues. You were going to have horrible, horrible things happen to you, and you weren't going to go to a place of safety at the end when the world falls apart.
Rapture type thing.
Similar to a rapture, that the chosen would go to. They taught it a place like Petra, out in the middle of the desert somewhere.
Yep. So it was kind of like an end time church where they knew they were preparing for Armageddon type events.
Oh, they were preparing for that. Of course, Herbert Armstrong initially thought that things were going to end in 1975, and even had a brochure out to that effect. It was called 1975 in Prophecy.
People locked in fear on that date and just swaying them.
And we were instructed. I mean, you did not attend to your dental work. You did not put anything away for your retirement or IRA or anything like that. Any monies you had went into the organization because you weren't going to be around long enough to retire.
Wow.
And you weren't going to be around long enough to worry too much about your dental work. And in fact, they were very anti going to doctors at all.
Yeah.
And you were supposed to be healed by God by anointing. And I'm not saying that it's not possible. I'm sure it is possible, but that you did not go to doctors. And in fact, as a young woman, I had always wanted to become a nurse. And I was told that by the ministry that I could not become a nurse because they were priestesses of Baal.
Babylon,
so
right?
I could not become a priestess of Baal.
Baal's like the short of Babylon, isn't it?
Yeah.
They changed the name to Babylon, yeah.
And
that's crazy.
So as time went on, after the death of Herbert Armstrong, and I worked for the organization. I was very into the organization. I worked for them for many years.
So you supported the work, I remember?
I supported the work, and I actually worked for the church.
Yeah.
And I was intimately involved in a lot. And I knew a lot. There were a lot of things that I wish I hadn't known. But as things began to loosen up and splinter,
crippled your faith.
I'm sorry?
Some of the things you discovered, did it cripple your faith kind of in the church and what you were supporting?
Well, I tried to support it. I mean, even as doctrines changed, I didn't necessarily agree with the changes. For instance, they did not believe in the Trinity, for one thing.
That was a big one. The cross.
That was a big thing.
Yeah.
They did not believe in the Trinity. And as time went on, after Herbert Armstrong died, the Trinity doctrine began to creep in.
Yeah.
And another thing that crept in is we were told that you do not call anyone reverend. Well, that changed as well.
Why did they explain that? Of why? Can you explain why they didn't keep the Trinity, or why reverend? They didn't.
Well, because the Bible, there is a quotation in the Bible that says, "Call no man reverend."
He did a lot of research. He was a really big scholar in the Bible.
I mean, it isn't to say that what he said. He had scripture to back it, but even the devil can quote scripture.
Yeah, that's true.
And you can, it's possible to make scripture say a lot of things.
Yeah.
And when he used terminology like here a little, there a little, that's in the Bible too. You do get truth here a little and there a little. And since leaving the organization, I am not able to. I'm just not able to become part of any organized religion. Right. I can't bring myself to do it, but I do gain truth here a little and there a little, and it is not all out of the King James Bible anymore.
Yeah, it's not one source of it.
You know, I think there is truth here a little and there a little, many, many places, and I don't believe that anyone, it is the height of vanity for anyone to think that they have a corner on truth.
Well, that's my direction with this group, is that I'm trying to get a feel for, I'm not saying it's like a cult group, but I'm trying to get a feel for the people in it, because there's many beautiful people that I've witnessed their healing, so I know there's truth somewhere in this, you know, and I've had my own healing experiences that I've testified to in front of the group in my own testimonies, so I'm trying to get a feel, because once you get a collective together, and it's almost like it creates an isolating effect whenever you found something and then you've kind of just stopped, and you know.
Well, I don't think you should ever stop looking.
Yeah, you should never stop. Yeah.
You should never stop looking, because if you stop looking, you stop growing.
Right.
And
but most of the people are saying, like, I haven't found, I'm still looking. There's a lot of truth seekers in this group that are still out there looking, but they haven't had anything near the experience of this either. I think that's kind of what draws people. Once they try it and they have the experience and they know that there's something real that's here, but it doesn't necessarily stop their looking. That's the majority of the people in the group that I feel. But then there's other people that do kind of deify E-LAi-sa, the speaker of this world, and they kind of raise her up into a status that she herself is consistently saying at the workshops, I am nobody's guru. I do not want to be in this position of people doing this. You know, she's always saying that, because I think she's aware of that also, and the tendencies that it could go in that direction.
Well, I hope she maintains that, because that is a very, very tempting position to be in.
Yeah.
You know, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
And if she can maintain that, the more power to her, because it's an easy mistake for a person to be told that they're the greatest, and told they're the greatest for a long time, and pretty soon they believe it.
Yeah.
But as I told you many, many times, you know, for at least the past several years, that any time that you find a good person, a really good person, I truly believe it's because of their relationship with God, with the universe, with whatever you want to call it as the absolute power. It is not because of their membership in an organization.
Yeah. Their status, right.
It's not because of something they belong to. It's because of the spiritual relationship that they have with the power that is.
Well, you always told me that through the years when we were all going to church, is that it was between me and God.
It is. Sure I truly believe that. And part of that came, like you said, even when we were going to the church, because on some level I saw the hypocrisy involved. And the more I knew, the more I was involved in working for the church, the more I realized the hypocrisy that, yes, they said one thing, but in practice something else was being done. Yeah. And the hypocrisy gets to you. And I think I mentioned to you before that as this group, you know, I still live in a little bitty community that is made up, an awful lot of our community is made up of splinter groups from the Worldwide Church of God. And they've kind of all gone off in all directions.
Whereas before they all met in that same warehouse,
Yeah,
field
the
house.
Worldwide Church of God, yeah. But now they have their own little groups.
There was kind of an evolution too. I remember because they used to have AM and PM, and then it just it was like started to splinter, and then there's big, huge splinter, and everybody really took sides, and that's the interest in having this interview with you is because it's almost like I'm reliving that with this group and experiencing how people treat each other from different sides of the camp. Because I experienced that growing up, And now,
well, the shunning, that was a big part of it. Shunning, that if somebody left the church, you were to have nothing to do with them. And I don't care if they were your husband, your wife, your child. If they left the group, you were not to have anything to do with them. You shunned them.
Leper.
Yes. You did not speak to them. You did not socialize with them, and which is kind of hard to do if you're living in the same house. But
right, that's how you and Dad were.
And this is what happened in your home, in our family. Yeah. Was when I left the church and your dad went into one of the more extreme splinter groups. He quite literally shunned the family. He would take his religion into a back bedroom and pray and study and do his thing, but had as little as possible to do with the family. And it had a horrible effect on you children. It really did. And that's what happens with a lot of these cult groups is they destroy families. And this one destroyed families like nobody's business.
Yeah, it was a wildfire.
And many of the splinter groups are still doing that. They are still destroying families. And the one that your father went into, being one of the more extreme ones, is actually demanding that when someone comes into their organization now, unless the whole family comes in, they need to divorce their mate. Wow. And that was the latest I heard on that group was that if you're coming into this church and your mate is not, then you need to divorce them before we will accept you. Right. So, that can hardly be called Christian in anybody's book. But I'm not saying that I am saying that the experience was devastating in many ways. It wasn't anything I would wish for anybody to have to go through. But I'm also a believer in what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yeah.
And you learn a lot. And as I've mentioned to you before, the people that were really my friends are still my friends, even though they're in different organizations. We're still friends.
Right. It's like a refinery process can occur through that if you're willing to take the step to go there.
And you find out what people are made of in the long run.
Yep.
You really, really find out what people are made of and who they are. And so it's not all negative by any means.
It isn't. It's the chaff. Separating the wheat from the chaff.
There can be good things that come from it. That's not to say that there aren't times that even now I can look back and I can feel bitter about some things, because I can. I mean, the control over my younger years, the control over my life, the things that I may have missed out on, the things that might have been different.
I think that's where, if you don't mind, I would really, I've relayed your story to so many friends in this group, and just the effects of what a split can, and not even just the split, but the church and the extremities of doctrines and different things, and how far people can take it, If you don't mind, like, sharing some of that growing up, what it was like to be, like, indoctrinated, I guess, basically.
Well, of course, like I said, you were not allowed to date outside the church or have friends outside the church. So, as I grew up and I was in high school, I actually, even in the 60s, believe it or not, I graduated in the 60s, I actually had to take a chaperone to my senior prom with me. And I had to go with a young man who was in the church. And so that was kind of interesting. But
these prearranged marriages and with the lines
and
stuff.
The college particularly, if you were honored to be accepted, do you want me to use the name of the college?
It was almost like Nazism, ethnic hygiene type stuff with the races, the racial lines.
Well,
yeah, Ambassador
growing
College.
up in the church, we kept the Jewish holy days. And for the Fall Feast of Tabernacles was the big one. And they discriminated. The Latins had to sit in one place, the blacks had to sit in another place. On the campgrounds, they were divided into different areas. They had their own social activities during the feast. It was they were big believers in Israelite, exclusive
white people.
Israelitism.
Yeah, as the English, the white people were the true Israelites.
Yeah. And so any members that came in that were black, brown, yellow, were all segregated into different areas, and heaven forbid none of them were allowed to intermarry.
Yep.
But it was even more strict if you went to Ambassador College. And I guess everybody, if you look up Armstrong, you're going to find Ambassador College, so it's no big secret.
Yeah, it's out there.
But
Sandy is the town that we lived at, where the headquarters, one of their headquarters is. Yeah.
And I went to college 2 years in Pasadena, which was the headquarters for the church. And I finished up my college here in Texas. But if you went to Ambassador College, you pretty much were told who you could and could not marry, who you were eligible to marry and who you were not. And when a young man went into counsel, and you didn't marry without counseling with a minister and getting it approved through them, you were told if you were or were not free to court that person. And so when we came into the church, I had a boyfriend in high school who was not in the church. And he actually converted. He converted to the church so that he could marry me. And as it turned out, I was, in the meantime, he asked me 3 times to marry him. It's a long story. The first time I was 16, and I had to finish high school. And so he went off and joined the Marines, and
you guys
then he
stayed
came
in touch
back.
and everything.
Yeah. We wrote.
You stayed loyal. Is that strong a bond?
And then he came back on leave and asked me again to marry him. And I said yes, and we became engaged because he had converted. And he was trying to get out of the military, which is another thing they do not believe in, is the military.
Yeah.
And so he was getting out of the military. And so while he was doing that, I was accepted to Ambassador College. And so I broke the engagement again to attend college. And while I was at college, of course, he ended up marrying somebody else, and so did I. And, 30 years later...
Yeah, that's the third time's a charm.
Was the third time, and we finally married. But things might have been very different. And it's not to say that the marriage would have worked out. It may not have. But what I am saying is that it was not possible because of the control that a sect had over my life. And I don't think, the last Feast of Tabernacles I went to with your father and his group that he was part of, because I tried to keep the marriage going in spite of everything.
Yeah.
And I actually began attending church with him because he told me, well, if you would quit your job with the Worldwide Church of God and attend my church with me, God will heal me of Parkinson's disease, which he had, and I will be able to support the family. And that really hurt my feelings because I had been the main support for the family. He quit teaching when he got Parkinson's, and his illness kind of became him. Between his illness and his religion.
Total opposite of a sovereign path or relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That became his life.
Yeah.
So anyway, I did. I began attending church with him, but the line in the sand for me was during that Feast of Tabernacles when the son of their prophet stood up in the pulpit and said, raise your hands, how many of you would go out, this was in Colorado Springs, beautiful area, mountains. How many of you, if you were told to go jump off a mountain cliff here, if you were told from the pulpit to do this, how many of you would do it? And hands went up all around me.
Oh my God.
And then I looked around and I thought, oh my goodness, no, I can't do this. I can't do this.
What did he follow with that? What was his?
Well, after he said that, he said, if your hand is not up, you do not belong here. And that's what opened my eyes.
Wow.
I did not belong there.
Yeah.
I did not belong there.
And Dad raised his hand right away.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Oh, man.
So that was the breaking point for me.
Yeah.
That was my aha moment,
Yeah, right.
But, I don't know what it takes for different people. We're all different. And certainly if God gives you, or I don't know what everybody has their own word for the Almighty, the power that is. In my vocabulary, it's God. But if God gives you that aha moment, you need to grab hold of it. And it needs to put question marks and red flags in your mind that he's trying to wake you up, that there's something else out there. This is not it.
And see, you're describing what just the previous interview I just got off with Ida. She was, I don't know if you heard the first part, but she went into more detail. Did you hear?
I heard a good deal of it. She's a really interesting lady.
Yeah. She was praying to God, and she had been exploring all these different religions, and she just had the sense that it was like you described, God reaches in, and there's some kind of intervention that happens with that, and that was her story that led up to this group. So, I keep hearing stories, and with me, it was very interactive, from the start, from the very first work of this woman that I've read and experienced. It was haunting through my life, up till I saw her videos on YouTube, and it was just something that really stuck with me, and I knew this was the same line that I was establishing to my source and to my hires that she had been developing herself. So there's a lot of synchronicities that come with that in this group, but it also has, to me, it kind of has the representation of being a cult, because everything is revolved around her and her work, and you can't, and because of social distortion and stuff, I don't think you can not have the error of that around people when it's just centralized towards one source. Like, there needs to be a panel, there needs to be a council, there needs to be more people sitting at this table.
I think you're right.
It has to be round.
I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. Because when one person, that is a huge burden, first of all, for any human.
It's a humongous burden, yes. That's what the first thing that I put out when I started this show is I want other people, please come forward to help with this. Like I do not want the stigma of me being this my show and all this. I mean, it's a group. It has to be a group effort, if it's going to occur. And it has. There's like people that have stepped up and offered to help, and that's when you know that it's going to be balanced and that it's not all in your hands, and you're going to have another perspective of it, and there's allowance for that.
Well, what really came through for me during your interview, and you can excuse me for being a proud mother, but okay. I loved the way you handled the interview. That you let it be about her. You let her define her own definitions of terms, because what we define in our own minds is what we define, but you let her explain where she was coming from and what her definition of certain things were. And I think that is the essence of being a good interviewer. To be able to say, I'm interviewing you, so this is about what you want to get across.
I didn't know I did that. I'm not sure which part you're talking about.
Well, you did. Like when she was talking about being an indigo child.
Okay.
And instead of saying, oh, an indigo child, and I know you've explained to me what an indigo child was, but you did not jump in there and say, oh, you this and this and this and this. Instead, you said, and what is your definition of an indigo child, which I thought was brilliant. Where you said, what do you think an indigo is? What is your definition of an indigo? And you let her define what she believed.
Yeah,
not what you.
That's a big word, and just in the New Age circuit, it's thrown around a lot. It really is.
Well, a lot of terminology is,
a lot of
and
terminology,
it means different things to different people. Yeah. So, when you're interviewing, I thought the technique was fantastic. That you said, "What does this mean to you?"
Right. Yeah.
And that was a tremendous way of handling an interview question.
Well, I guess I'm trying to. That's really the direction I've been trying to do with this group since I started, was to kind of redirect it towards our personal stories and what we have to share that's tangible, and to preserve.
That was excellent. I really, really enjoyed the interview because it wasn't. You actually said very little. You kind of led her in certain directions, or you would bring her back on track or something. But it was her story,
okay.
And it was really interesting.
Well, I feel like your story is like really good for people in this group to hear too, because. Or my story also, like with the split, because of what
this group has just gone through. You were just a little boy when all this was happening, and even when your father, when the split in the church came, and your father went with the Philadelphia group, and I stayed with the worldwide group, and you were something like 8 years old or something. You were just a little guy. And you had attended their private school, and you had been indoctrinated into saying, even with your sisters, when you come home and you say, well, my school is better than your school because the kids in my school belong to the church, and I did not like that.
Yeah.
And you were thoroughly brought up and indoctrinated in this.
Yeah.
And then when your dad went into the other group, and I was still working, your dad chose to homeschool you to keep that indoctrination within the house.
Yeah.
And it greatly limited you.
Well, he taught me a lot more, too. He made sure I knew about Greek mythology and the World War II, and he instilled a lot of values beyond that, too.
There were good things. There really were. But at the same time,
there was an air of we would read scripture too, and he had me memorize the flashcards and different things in the church and doctrines and stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think by any means that I would never say that everything that was taught was wrong. No.
Yeah.
No. There was a great deal of truth.
And that's the attraction that was to it in the first place. That's what attracted so many people, because he was touching on some
great deal of truth.
The pagan days, the Christmas being pagan, all these the wrong dates, you know.
And even the dietary laws.
No pork.
There was good dietary laws. There were,
we couldn't eat seafood.
Focus on family, focus on ethics, on there were some really good principles.
Just like in Nazi Germany, they had really good ethics and with the family and everything, the discipline and there was a lot of things that came with the hideousness of control, you know.
And I think that's what it amounts to in cults, is the control. And that's why when you talk about your group being centered around one person, it scares me to death.
Yeah.
Because I've been there, done that.
Right. Yeah.
Been there, done that. And it is very, very dangerous. And how do you prevent that? I don't know. But I do know that it should send up red flags. It should make people think, yes, this person has truth. Yes, this person is trying to do a good work. I admire the fact that she does not want to be the be-all and end-all. I think that is admirable. But keep your antennas up should that change.
Huh. Well, it started with her doing the seminars and trying to get in the New Age scene. She was doing workshops from her house, and then she got married to a man in England, I believe, and so he became the next speaker, and he began kind of tapping into her line of information. And so she said that her line said that he was speaker number 2. And then this other woman came into the picture, and she was a businesswoman. I don't know the whole story, so I don't have details to it. And if I'm wrong, then I'll be corrected hopefully with this. But she came into the picture, and they ended up formulating it more into a outreach for more people to see a broader audience and making a business out of it. And that's where Azurite Press started. And so she became speaker 3. And so you have the 3 speakers here, and it's a little more complicated. There's money involved, and she's not knowing exactly where the money is going and how the copyrights are working. He's having her sign certain papers that what she says that she is not fully aware of. That was her disclosure of what the papers were. And so this was all just recent events where her line of information now says that upon new information from her discovering this new information about where the money has been going and kept from her, and of course this is all tied into the spiritual aspect of it too. She's going into past lives and the patterns, and you know, showing how all this works of why they're corrupt, and then renouncing. She's saying the Guardians are renouncing their speaker's contract. And this was all live at a workshop in front of, you know, right there on stage with the full emotion, you know, she was crying at some parts. And so you can imagine the impact on a group, that the emotional impacts and the tethering to these people that have been here and have been around and helped the foundation of this work, you know, and have devoted their hearts. And maybe I'm not trying to grand stage and say that these are perfect people by all means, or I don't know the full story. And a lot of us in the group don't know the full story, except the ones that were close to these ex-speakers. And so to me, there was an option of presenting it in a better manner, I guess a more roundtable-ish manner, to where everybody is at a podium, they have a microphone, they can all speak what their truth is, instead of dominating a stage saying, you are renounced, and with the full emotional impact that comes with that, you know. and you can imagine the damage that was done in this group from that, and that just happened in May 2012.
Of course.
So we've spent the last few years trying to recover from that as a group, and I'm by no means taking any sides in this. I'm just, a lot of people will know from this interview, they'll know my position growing up and seeing a split in a church. Like
well, the politics, when politics become involved, it's amazing what people could really accomplish if they didn't worry who got the credit for it. Politics always becomes involved where human beings are concerned, and me, the big me, comes in instead of the work that you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
When me becomes involved, then everything else goes out the window. And this is what happens I think in any sect. When you talk about sects, that's what they are. They are somebody's gigantic ego. And that's what happened, with Satan. He imagined himself as God. I will storm the heavens and take it over. And it becomes a gigantic ego thing instead of a work that you are trying to give to others, that you're trying to help others. It becomes about you. And once it becomes about you, you're not going to accomplish anything. If it becomes about you, you might as well hang it up.
If you associate you with your line to God and your connection to information. Yeah. Well, to me, that's where my ears go up, and my alerts, natural reflexes to truth and where the direction of this stuff is going, is when she's associated. She calls them the beloveds and the guardians.
Mm-hmm.
And so, whenever she throws in, well, the guardians told me to stay in this relationship of abuse, and the guardians told me this. I'm looking at this as a scholar of this work and putting this stuff to work and knowing that it's real. I'm putting that in the same context of my line of information, of trust in her line of information, when it's starting to sound more like this is her personal life that she's intermingling with her line, and throwing that in the mix with it.
No, you can't do that. It can't be about you. It can't be about you.
It's just a mind teaser.
This is something that we've talked about too. Is the volunteer work that I do, and that I go out and I give seminars and things like that on Alzheimer's, and I have a support group for caregivers and things like that. But the one thing before I go and talk to any group, before I have a meeting, the one thing I do before any of those is pray, and whatever prayer is to you. But I reinforce to myself, help me to be a tool. Help me to, work through me to give these people what they need. Help it not to be about me. Help it to be about them. Help it to be something that they need, not something that I think they need.
Thy will, I guess.
Yeah. And if it becomes about you, it's not going to be successful, because, of and by ourselves, we're, without spirit, we're nothing. I just, when it becomes about you, then you're in trouble.
Well, I think there's a lot of interpretations that came after that this was clearly going to be about her now, and what her decisions were, and she was calling the shots from here on, and that's where a lot of the lines in the sand just got drawn instantly, like from that workshop. I talked with people that shared with me. I was up all night for 2 nights in a row talking to this woman from Australia that ran the Australian business for her, sold her products and supported her work, went out doing seminars for Kathara, and was very well known in the group. And she shared quite a bit with me about the technique that they had used in doing the house cleaning of the business after this workshop. And to me, it wasn't humane. There wasn't anything human with dignity involved in that, in the way that they handled this. She was pretty much ousted overnight. She was told that her efforts were no longer needed, and everything that she had come to establish in this work, everything was gone in a night, overnight. And I was just to hear somebody share that type of story with you and the impact, and to feel the emotional level, and to admire a woman in this work who had given her all and her strength, and was clearly a spiritually devoted and practicer of this work, practicing in her life, healing, growing, expanding, able to carry it to other communities and spread it, and to be just ripped out from the work. She still goes to her workshops, by the way. She still is completely devoted. She's completely devoted to her.
Wow.
It was an amazing thing to experience, and I've carried it with me since, and it's affected my outlook greatly, to where I have to catch myself and being able to hold my own integrity, through it.
Well, when people are involved, there are going to be mistakes. I mean, anytime human beings touch something, it seems like, we're not perfect. and we get to messing with stuff too much. We're going to distort it. We're going to make something ugly out of it. When it becomes about us, you're going to distort, you're going to destroy, you're going to pervert, because it's not, anything good is not about us. Anything good is not about us. It's about spirit.
Well, the distinction and the ability to discern the difference and be able to hold that, I think, under the surmounting pressure that there's no telling what kind of letters she receives, or she's getting obviously a lot of information of what's out there and what's being said about her, and to the point where I think that she's honestly might be obsessed with it, because it comes up at workshops with, this, we're not like this, and using what somebody else said, and we're not, and just, there's obviously a complex there, and there's obviously something that's kind of moved in with this work that's affected her, that she's trying to work through. And I think a lot of the people in this group are really evolved enough to kind of see that and do their own self-healing, because that's actually where the turn of the teachings have taken us, is into self-healing. She's pronounced that a lot. She's like, she shut down all the Kathara workshops and everything, and that Kathara was like Reiki type stuff, like a way advanced Reiki, where you could find somebody's points on the Kathara grid to their body and do healing, and know how to do that, and with the chakras and everything and the colors. So she pretty much has shut all that down, and it's taken the turn of this being a self-healing path, and that nobody else is going to do your healing for you, which I love. And
I think that's true. Nobody can do it for you.
I love that, and I think that's very symbolic of her own healing that's taken place too. And she's had doctors on the workshops with narcissism. She's addressing narcissism. She's addressing some very powerful ego issues, in the psyche for all of us to really look at as she's doing her healing, which it's just beautiful to witness after the split, the turn that the work has taken. It's really turned back to ourselves and our sovereignty, and I think that's what everybody really needed to hear after such a huge emotional impact.
Well, that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's gotten really, really positive. It's really good.
Well, if her work can come out of this stronger, then that's wonderful.
She did some alchemy with it. Yeah.
But if it becomes an inward thing, where it's poor me, they're picking on me,
yeah,
I'm being abused.
That was some of the workshops right after there was a little overtone of that, and then as there was realization with that, I don't know, she goes back and listens to her workshops or examines how she handles things. Mm-hmm. It feels like she does, because she definitely addressed those things I was hearing when she brought up narcissism and these doctors that, and suggesting these books, these really good books on these topics and things. So I think that she's got a grip on it totally, and it's gotten less and less to the point to where she prefaces everything with, this is a theory, so it's not as like strict as being the one and only type thing. It doesn't have that air about it that I smell, that I was very familiar with, growing up.
Oh, yes.
So, it feels like it's really eased a lot, since that. It could have gone one direction really bad, but it didn't.
I'm glad to hear that. I hope it stays.
She had a lot of support. She has a lot of people praying for her, a lot of energetic support. Like I said, I mean, this woman after the split is still supporting her work. And she still understands where she's at, where E-LAi-sa is at. And a lot of us do. A lot of us did through the whole thing. We understood the emotional stuff she was going through, like at that workshop where she denounced their contracts. We knew the frustration. We could hear it in her voice, and we're human too. And we kind of respected that. Some of them a little more than others, and kind of got into the whole angst vibe or revenge or whatever. And you could feel those lower emotions in the shield too, and trying to creep in through that. But it felt like it was just purged out really quick.
Well, none of us is infallible. None of us is perfect, and we're a work in progress. And we need to cut each other some slack sometimes.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of my effort in doing this too, is to bring more awareness, like, to the other side of the split, maybe to her side, to show how much they really did contribute to this work. And I think that should be acknowledged. Like, it should just be wiped out, because me studying, I went on this World War II and Hitler, just totally engulfing myself in the histories of what happened over there, and how America and Britain and the victors wrote the history books afterwards, and how we looked at that nation, how we divided them, and wrote the books, how we handled that, and how much integrity was in that. And to me, finding out some of the research that I found out from that, it gave me a lot of insight into how we view the loser of situations, and how we can kind of smear to make ourselves look a little bit better. And I think that's kind of the effect. And I don't think anyone's immune to that, as far as group dynamics and stuff like that.
Well, the losers are always the bad guys.
It's a rub it in type stuff. Yeah. So
the losers are the bad guys.
Yeah. And there's usually no explanation, and that it is what it is, and we won, and they're bad. That's the evil.
Well, if you've done very much research into this, you know that we were not lily white.
No. Well, I see because we were doing our own racism over here with the blacks. So I mean, it wasn't anything to justify too much. We couldn't take it too far.
Well, And even during the war, we had our prisoner of war camps. We had American
Japanese,
citizens in this country that just because they were Japanese, they were rounded up and put in camps.
Right.
They didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
No, we did some pretty ugly things too.
Yeah, I see that, but then it's kind of like how she was able to acknowledge that on some higher level or some other level, the dignity that was also there, because I saw this one story that really stood out about America and how we handled it over there with the rebuilding of Germany and how it was divided up. Here's Britain's side, here's Russia, and here's ours. And at one point it got so tense between Russia having the divisions and the borders that we took it upon ourselves to be humane enough to fly our planes over there and bring them food and clothes and better lifestyle of living. And there was almost a teeter-totter of another war about to happen, because as we were doing that, they brought in their fleets of warplanes. I saw this documentary on it. It was really good. But for us to take that extra step in humanity really said a lot. That we care about you this much, about your rebirth and your rebuilding of a country. And I think that's still a lot of integrity that this country, the core of us, really, that's what made the country so great, was that type of spirit, to have that.
Mm-hmm.
Did you hear of that? Have you heard of that story?
Well, we did a lot after the war to
we went beyond
mend things.
Because even the Brits were doing torture. They wanted to torture the Nazis and the Germans and everyone. They just looked down on them as the lowest life form,
Well, war's not pretty.
Yeah. World War. It's crazy.
Was there any other questions that you had about, or anything else you wanted to discuss?
No, I guess that's about it. I think we covered everything. That's good. Thanks for sharing.
Well, I feel badly, and I've mentioned this to you many times. I feel badly that I brought you up in this kind of a situation. But again, it's you can only teach what you know. And if that's all you know, as a parent, you do the best you can with what you know.
Yeah.
And if that's what you know, then that's what your kids get. But
that's kind of where I'm at, as a parent right now, because I'm having to admit the things that I wasn't taught, and the right and wrong ways that I'm seeing play out in front of me, in parenting. Because you try some things and it just doesn't work, and that's not going to work, and
But you just do the best you can with what you know, and that's all anybody can do as a parent. None of us is going to be perfect. And again, like I said, I feel really bad that you children were brought up in that. But at the time, it was all I knew. And again, that doesn't mean that it was some big, ugly, horrible thing. There were good things. But I think, too, that it has made you, I see it in you, I think it has made you a stronger person. I think it has made you more cautious about what you swallow whole. It has made you learn to use your own mind and come up with your own conclusions, whether or not I agree with them or anybody else does. And I think that's really, really important, is just the strength to stand by your own convictions. And even with your father, I think I've told you more than once that I had to admire the fact that he had the courage of his convictions. They may not have been right, but he had the courage to stand by them. So whatever it is you believe, you need to have the courage to prove it to yourself and to stand by it.
Yeah, I believe in that too. That's what I was saying earlier. Even like people that are doing negative things right now, as long as it's not in deceit and they're not.
They truly believe it.
Yeah.
You know,
if they truly are standing, it's going to speed up their karma process to be able to, instead of sneaking around, because it's just like it's just wasting time. You know?
I mean, you can be sincerely wrong.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. It is possible to be sincerely wrong. And I don't know that God holds that against us when we're sincerely wrong and we're doing the best we can. At least I hope he doesn't. And that I admire the fact that you are standing by the courage of your convictions as your father did. Whether he was right or not, he did stand by the courage of his convictions.
Right.
And it's one of the things, some of the ways that you're somewhat like your dad is that you're very courageous. You're very courageous in your convictions. And there's not a lot of that around anymore. And I think it's something to be admired, that you have the strength of character, the strength to say, this is what I stand by, this is what I believe. And if later you find out you were wrong, hopefully you have the same courage to say, I was wrong, and this is why I was wrong, and I've proven to myself that this was wrong. Not that somebody else told you it was wrong, but you discovered that it was wrong.
Yeah. And just seeing the impact that's had on some of the people's lives, to have to be forced to accept it, that this was the way it's going to be, I felt was wrong. But it was very touchy ground to get on, because I also felt she was right, and her it's like the proof is in the pudding, and if she's still producing stuff that I've tried and tested, and it's escalated my healing experience, then she's still tuned into something that's right.
Well, so, there's something else that's in the Bible, by their fruits you shall know them.
By their fruits, yeah. Yep.
And if the tree is producing good fruit, then that ought to tell you something.
All right.
So,
that's a good place to end it. Thanks, Mom. I appreciate it.
Okay.
All right.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Love you.
Keep listening to the interviews. Love you too.
Okay.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.